I saw Susan leaving George's apartment early this morning, and she didn't look like she was just there for a chat. Before I tell you who Susan is and what she was doing at George's apartment, make sure to hit that subscribe button so I know my work is appreciated. Thanks. Maplewood Estates was an upscale retirement community that catered to those who had lived their lives in comfort and wished to spend their later years in the same manner. Harold Whitman, a wealthy 68-year-old widower, was one of the residents. Harold had retired from a successful career in finance and moved into Maplewood Estates after his wife passed away 3 years prior. Despite his wealth, Harold was a humble man who valued honesty and loyalty above all else. Harold had one daughter, Karen, who lived on the West Coast. She had her own family and a demanding job, so her visits were infrequent. Though Harold missed her, he understood her situation and never pressured her to visit more often. They spoke on the phone regularly, and he was content knowing she was happy and well. One day, a new face appeared at Maplewood Estates, Susan Miller, a 45-year-old woman with a striking appearance. She was tall, with long dark hair and a stride so confident that it was hard to look away. Susan was the daughter of one of the newer residents, Evelyn Miller, who had moved in after suffering a stroke. Evelyn was frail and needed assistance with daily activities, which was why Susan came over often. At least that was what she told everyone. Susan had fallen on hard times and had been forced to move in with her mother temporarily while she figured out her next move. When she learned that her mother would be moving into Maplewood Estates, Susan saw an opportunity. The place was known for housing wealthy retirees, and Susan's sharp mind quickly calculated the potential benefits. She was tired of struggling and saw this as her ticket to an easier life. Harold Whitman was an ideal target. He was wealthy, generous, and, most importantly, lonely. Susan began to casually insert herself into his life, always finding excuses to visit her mother at the same times Harold would be in the common areas. Their first real conversation happened one afternoon in the garden. Harold was sitting on a bench, enjoying the sun, when Susan approached. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, her smile warm and inviting. "Not at all," Harold replied, returning her smile. He moved over to give her space on the bench. "I'm Susan Miller," she introduced herself. "My mother, Evelyn, moved in recently." "Harold Whitman," he said, extending his hand. "I've seen you around. How's your mother settling in?" "She's adjusting. It's been tough for her since the stroke, but this place is lovely. The staff is great, and she seems to be doing better." "I'm glad to hear that. It can be hard, moving to a new place at our age," Harold said thoughtfully. Susan nodded sympathetically. "It's tough on me too, seeing her like this. But I'm grateful she's here, surrounded by good people." They chatted for a while longer, and Susan was careful to steer the conversation towards Harold's interests. She had done her homework, learning about his love for golf, his travels, and his late wife, whom he spoke of with great affection. Susan played her part perfectly, showing interest in everything he said, laughing at his jokes, and complimenting his knowledge. Over the next few weeks, Susan continued to make herself a regular presence in Harold's life. She would often find him in the library, the garden, or the dining hall, always with a friendly smile and a ready ear. Harold, who had been lonely for some time, appreciated the company. He found Susan to be charming, intelligent, and easy to talk to. It wasn't long before Harold began to develop feelings for Susan. She was much younger than him, but the age difference didn't seem to matter when they were together. She made him feel alive again. One evening, as they were sitting together in the library, Harold decided to express his feelings. "Susan," he began, a bit nervously, "I want you to know that I've really enjoyed getting to know you these past few weeks. You've brought something back into my life that I thought I had lost forever." Susan smiled, placing her hand on his. "Harold, I feel the same way. You're a wonderful man, and I'm grateful for the time we've spent together." Harold smiled. "I know there's an age difference, but I don't care about that. I care about you. I'd like us to see where this could go." Susan squeezed his hand, her eyes locking onto his. "I'd like that too, Harold." And so, their relationship started. Harold was happier than he had been in years, showering Susan with attention and gifts. He introduced her to his circle of friends at Maplewood Estates, and though some were surprised by the relationship, most were happy to see Harold so content. However, not everyone was convinced by Susan's charade. Jack Thompson, a retired attorney who had become one of Harold's closest friends at Maplewood Estates, was suspicious from the start. Jack had seen Susan around and had heard a few things from the staff that didn't sit right with him. She was always chatting up the wealthiest male residents, and her sudden interest in Harold seemed too convenient. One morning, as Jack was out for his usual walk, he spotted Susan leaving the apartment of another resident, a wealthy widower named George. It was early, too early for a casual visit, and Susan looked disheveled. Jack's suspicions deepened. He decided to talk to Harold that afternoon, catching him as he returned from the golf course. "Harold, can we talk for a minute?" Jack asked, his tone serious. "Of course, Jack. What's on your mind?" Harold replied, sensing the urgency in his friend's voice. Jack hesitated, not wanting to hurt Harold but feeling he had no choice. "Harold, I've been noticing some things about Susan. I saw her leaving George's apartment early this morning, and she didn't look like she was just there for a chat." Harold frowned, the joy of the morning fading. "What are you suggesting, Jack?" Jack sighed. "I think Susan's playing you, Harold. I don't think she's in this for love. I think she's in this for your money." Harold's expression hardened. "Susan's been nothing but kind to me. She's been a breath of fresh air in my life." "You're wrong about her." Jack shook his head. "I hope I am, Harold. But just be careful, all right?" Harold walked away, troubled by Jack's words, but unwilling to believe them. He trusted Susan and didn't want to think that she could be deceiving him. But Jack couldn't let it go. He decided to hire a private investigator to look into Susan's background. He had a gut feeling that there was more to her story, and he wanted to protect his friend. The investigator didn't take long to uncover the truth. Susan's financial troubles were worse than anyone knew. She had been married to a wealthy man who had left her with nothing after discovering she had been cheating on him. Since then, Susan had been bouncing from one bad situation to another, her desperation growing with each failed attempt to secure a stable future. Armed with this information, Jack knew he had to tell Harold. He waited until they were alone in the dining hall one evening, the report in hand. "Harold, I need to show you something," Jack said, his tone grave. Harold looked up, noticing the seriousness in his friend's eyes. "What is it, Jack?" Jack handed him the report. "I hired a private investigator to look into Susan's background. I didn't want to do this, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. You need to see this." Harold took the report, his hands trembling as he read through the pages. The details were damning: Susan's financial ruin, her infidelity, and her pattern of seeking out wealthy men. Harold's face paled as the truth sank in. "She's been using me," he whispered, his voice filled with disbelief and hurt. Jack placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry, Harold. I know this is hard, but you needed to know the truth." Harold nodded, his mind racing. He couldn't believe he had been so blind, so foolish. He thought of all the time he had spent with Susan, all the affection he had shown her, and it all felt like a lie. The next morning, Harold decided to confront Susan. He waited for her in the garden, the same place where they had first met. When she arrived, smiling as usual, he felt a wave of anger and sadness wash over him. "Harold," she greeted him, leaning in for a kiss. Harold stepped back, his expression cold. "We need to talk, Susan." She looked confused. "What's wrong?" Harold held up the report. "I know everything, Susan. I know about your past, your financial troubles, and what you've been doing here. You've been using me, and I was too blind to see it." Susan's face went pale, her confident facade crumbling. "Harold, I can explain." "Don't bother," Harold interrupted, his voice firm. "It's over, Susan. Whatever this was, it's done. I trusted you, and you betrayed me." Susan's eyes filled with tears, but Harold saw no sincerity in them. She had been caught, and now she was trying to play the victim. "Please, Harold, I didn't mean to hurt you." I was desperate," she pleaded. Harold shook his head, his heart heavy. "Desperation is no excuse for what you've done. I'm sorry for whatever you've been through, but that doesn't justify deceiving me or anyone else here." Susan realized there was no saving the situation. She had lost everything: her chance at a secure future, her standing in the community, and whatever feelings Harold might have had for her. Without another word, she turned and walked away, her shoulders slumped in defeat. Though heartbroken, Harold was grateful to have friends like Jack who had his back. He also wasn't going to just let it go. Using both of their connections, Jack and Harold had a devastating story published in the local newspaper, exposing Susan for the gold digger she was. They didn't use any of the men's names, but they felt responsible to warn others. Thus, Susan's reputation was ruined not only within the Maplewood Estates community and well beyond it. While Harold emerged stronger with his friendship with Jack, more solid than ever, Susan found herself looking for low-paying jobs just to be able to get her basic needs covered. What do you think? Was Jack right to expose Susan? Or was he wrong to get involved? After all, Harold was clearly enjoying himself. Let me know in the comments, and please don't forget to like the video. Thanks.